Well, hey, this is Jerry bringing you another episode of What's Broke today. I'm working on now. This is a Scag Wildcat. All right, our Scag Wildcat, our front wheel, the bearings are bad, so if I pull my socket out, it wobbles everywhere. So figure we'll take it apart and see what all we need to get this thing back in shape. And if you happen to own a right stander, this is almost identical. Alright, I get the nut loose, and then so as we jack that up, and then I pick this up and take the nut off, and I can drop this out through the bottom usually. And that, I mean, that's rusty down in there. And I'm probably going to edit out quite a bit of some of this, because a lot of it is pointless stuff. But there we go. As you can see, I'll get it in the camera. It looks like a lot of rust. Yeah, so upper bearing's bad, lower bearing's bad. Okay, I'm back. Now start out, I'm gonna see if I can get this upper. You can see that's wasted. I'm just going to take it, drive out the bearing races. Alright, there's the bottom one. Now you remember when they told you to wear your safety glasses? Well, this is why. As I was driving that race out, it shattered. Of course, it's hardened steel, and I had my glasses on, so luckily I didn't even feel nothing hit me on the face or on the forehead, but boy, it sure made a noise and sparked when it broke. So, you know, upper and lower bearings, 2 seals. There's actually a seal that drives up from the bottom, but yeah, you see how nasty that is? And that's just from getting water in it and not getting re-greased. And of course, when the bearings fell and started wobbling, it would just wallers the seal out. So I will pluck the dust cap off the other side, and it ain't as bad, but as far as looseness, but it's just as bad on the rust. I'm going to make a parts of this. I'm going to get 2 of the seals, 2 outer races, 2 of the bearings with the inner races. And I'm actually going to get 2 new caps and 2 new lock nuts, because I'm sure me taking it off over that rust is going to mess up the nylon in that nylock nut. Alright, so we got, that'll be the left side apart. I got the right side apart, and then here's the bearings from one of the bearings from the right side, and see all the rust. Now, what we're doing now is I've cleaned out this opening, and see inside of this one, we're smooth. Might be one little burr right in there, but not much. But on this side, some of these marks that you can see down in that hole are from me trying to get that bearing race out, and that's probably because here on the front side where that nut was riding down here, it put a ridge there, and that's probably why I broke the race. I get my Dremel tool and just put a stone wheel in it. And I'm just gonna turn that on, and actually that back there, and probably this little one over here. But this where that nut was rubbing on, because as he was driving, that nut was rubbing up here. So I'm just basically going to cut that down. And there might actually be a dent right there from where he ran into something. But you get that smoothed up as best you can. And don't over grind. You don't need to put divots in it. See, for me, I can tell by the sound, which you may not hear it over the Dremel running, but when you get down where it's smooth, the sound of the Dremel changes. Get that all smoothed up, and then we can get things out of the way, and then take my brake clean and my thing, and because we definitely want to get all the stuff from the Dremel washed out. And we can dry everything out. All I'm waiting on is for bearings to get here, and we've got all the rust and old bearing material cleaned out. Now we're ready to go back together. Alright, our next step in getting this back together is, I took and sanded the inside of these down with the just a little bit of regular sandpaper. Right there we go. I used it to sand inside here, make sure we was smooth, because I had a little rough spot. Did the same thing on the bottom. Likewise, I did both of the areas where the bearing rides on the spindle. I wanted to make sure my new bearing slid on and off of these nice and smooth, and there wasn't no binding or resistance. And then of course took the new seals and slid down and made sure that they was the right size. And then of course I get my race driver out and find the one that fits my bearing race, and then you set that up there and just gently so you hear it bottom out, and then make sure there isn't nothing got down on it to roughen it up. And we'll take our one that comes in from the bottom. That's sometimes the hard part, is you get it going up in there. And it gets going a little crooked. That's like, boy, that goes up in there a long ways. And actually, if it wasn't for the angle, that would, I'd get a better swing on that too. All right. And once you get it all the way up in there, then we can move to the other side. Yeah, because me beating on that, I kind of Kind of flared the edge of that just a little, but that looks like it's all the way down in and smooth. Alright, well, we're damn near all the way up in there. And I kind of got it going a little crooked. Yeah, so, and you'll be able to feel when the get all the way in, the gap will be gone. Now I'm going to clean this up some, then I'll come back to put the bearings in. Well, hey there, in our last segment, I showed you me driving in bearing races, which I had sound. The segment I recorded after that, where I was packing the bearings, no sound. So I'm probably going to play part of that segment just so you can see what I did, but you won't hear me talking, even though I did talk. If I wasn't so far along, and I'd take stuff back apart, but I'm not going to take things apart. But the thing that I thought was important things, when I did the bearing packing, I use this thing. It's called an Easy Squeeze bearing packer. On the top, which I don't know if this is a model number. Up here it says A like Apple dash Z like Zachary, and at the bottom it says 270, and that might be a model number or part number in case you want one of these. But we'll get back to our easy bearing packer that consists of a tub full of grease. It does have a grease fitting on top of it, so you can pump grease back and refill it. And then of course it has this cap, which when it's real full, you can put it down like so, or you can pull it out, turn it a quarter of a turn, and it gives you a gap. And see, since I'm not at the very top, I'm going to put it like that and slide that down on the top, and it'll slide down. And then I take my bearing, where in the old days you'd get a wad of grease in your hand and you'd take the bearing and start working it and fill the bearing up with grease. Well, if I put this in there with the taper down, the bearing surface around here seals on the inside of this, because it's kind of cone shaped down in, so it's tapered. And then I take and drop the bearing down in, like with the taper, the smaller part of the taper down. Then I don't really want this full of grease and get collecting dirt, so I'm not going to fill it with grease, because that's actually a wheel bearing for a Sea-Doo or small utility trailer with probably a 2,000 pound axle. I think that's a 1 inch or 1 1/16 bearing. But I'll set that down in there. Then when I put this down in, and you'll see in the next segment, when I put this down in, and I just take the palm of my hand and press down, and I watch around the bearing on the wide side, in between the inner race and the cage, and the grease is going to come up in between there and fill up the area in the rollers. And then Where the outer race, I put it in the front of the frame there. I took some grease and smeared inside of the bearing race, just so there's grease on both sides. That way when I put the bearing in, we'll have grease on the inside and the outside. And just like if you pack the wheel bearings on your trailer, or on the front of an old car, you got the bearings full of grease. I mean, it's a real handy thing. I bought this off one of the, I think it's the Snap-on or Mac tool guy. Man, I probably had this thing for 30 years, and I actually got two of them, because when I worked at the car dealer, I had one at work and one at home, because I hated doing bearings by hand. And this takes say a 4 or 5 minute process of getting grease in a bearing, and cuts it down to, I don't know, 15 or 20 seconds at the most. All depends on how quick you can drop a bearing in, smash it, and then take this off and pull the grease filled bearing out and put her together. But a very handy dandy device to have if you don't like getting grease all over your hands. And also, you'll also notice I was wearing latex gloves, because that's the one thing such a mess to clean off your hands. You get it full of bearing grease. So this is the one time you'll see me wearing some kind of a glove, and it's those latex gloves. That probably the only other time is when I get out sharpening lawnmower blades. They'll get hot, and I'll wear a heavy glove or a leather glove just to keep it from getting my hands hot. But so yep, the next segment there won't be no sound, and I apologize. Have no idea what I did, but I'm gonna show you some of what I did, but I'm probably gonna edit out quite a bit, because if you can't hear me talking, a lot of it may not make no sense. So I'll be back shortly. Alright, my new nylock nuts showed up, so we're going to start out and take off the old ones that I just used them to hold that together while I was waiting on those to show up, because they was out in the mail, out for delivery today, so that was a good thing. And a lot of the reason for the new nylock nut is because all the rust from the other ones was going to mess up the nylock part of it. And if the nylock doesn't do its job, then going to probably work loose. Look at the one on that side. It's being a little difficult starting, but this one's going right in. And twofold on the nylock nut is, you know, we don't want them coming loose while we're driving, and we also want them to hold good tension, because when we set the preload on these bearings, right here I gotta tighten down. I'm gonna apologize again for the lack of sound in the last segment, because it made some of that video watching probably, well, either made it real boring or you was like, damn, I'm glad he's not talking. But okay, so we get our nuts turned down where we get all the free play out, where there isn't no slop in the bearings and they turn smooth. The next thing we want to do is we want to add a little bit of extra tension or preload to the bearings, because have you ever been flying across a yard on your mower and all of a sudden the wheel starts doing this, wig-wagging back and forth? It's due to a lack of preload. So what we'll do is just tighten that up a little more, and you want this to turn smooth without binding, but if you can spin it and it'll spin all the way around, like, I don't know, let me move this camera back just a little. Because see, like this one, well, I got too much preload on it already, but we'll loosen it up a little. And if we can spin it around, it goes like that. There's not enough preload, and that's when you get that wagging of that wheel. So we just add a little more preload so that when we see I flip it, it turns smooth, but it doesn't flip all the way around. And I'll turn it a few turns. Could be just like we're doing wheel bearings. We got to get I'll make sure we get all the grease out of the rollers, or most of it. And then I think that one needs just a little more. Just about there. But anytime you got that wagging of the wheel and it's doing this while you're going down across the yard, and it can get severe, where it makes it hard to control, we just need to add some preload. And once we got our preload set, alright, as we get to the end, Last thing I'm going to do is, there's plugs on the these casters, and I had to go get a different socket, so let's make sure we got the same thread, and it does look like the same thread. So, and these are 1/4 by 28 grease fitting that I'm putting in here. Basically, I'm just going to tighten that up and just take my grease gun and wipe off the tip because it's just got down in the dirt. Curtis, you gotta settle down, dog. And basically, I'm just going to put it up on there. Now, transition into the other side, because while I was putting grease in the other side, the air compressor kicked on, and with it on, I mean, all you get is a mouth moving and no noise. But I'll come over here and put the grease fitting in like I did on the other side. Get her snug, and then we'll take our grease gun and start filling her up. Alright, and then I just put enough grease in so I can see it coming up through the bearing, and we're done with grease. And the thing is we never want that completely full. We got to have a little bit of air space in there, and that's where the cap will come in, is because if that's full of I mean completely full, when it gets hot out, you know, when things get hot, they expand. Well, this grease does too. So on a nice sunny day, our expanding grease will literally push that cap off. So that's why I'm going to wipe off everything that's on top on both sides. Throw that away. Alright, so we can take our cap, lay it up there. Take my pipe and put down over it. Get her squared up, and then drive her down on, and we come over here. Yep. That looks good. All right. Well, that's going to finish up getting our front caster wheel bearings on our Scag replaced. That, of course, we got new inner bearing races, new bearings, new grease seals, everything greased up good, new dust caps, new nuts, preload set on the bearings. I think the only thing I got left I'm going to do is probably actually grease the wheel bearings themselves, because I figure if you got water in up here, there's probably water down there, but those are turning really good. And like the tire on here on the would be the right front, it looks practically brand new. So I almost bet he's been in there and did something to the bearings. But yeah, I'm gonna grease those and then pick up my tools, and I can take her for a test drive. That I appreciate you watching. Definitely take a thumbs up for a like if you found this video to be helpful. That I appreciate you watching, and no telling what else you're going to see on What's Broke Today. Thank you.